Then. We ready?
Yeah.
Can people hear me out there at all? Okay, here we go. I call the November, with your permission, sir. We'll just wait for the dog to.
He wants to get done.
I call the November 25th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Brereton.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
McGee.
Here.
Porter.
Here.
Radcliffe.
Here.
Snow.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you very much. Under public comment, we have no one signed up to offer a viewpoint this evening. Under public forum, we have none scheduled. Under reports of officers, boards, and special committees, under public safety unfinished business, we have none this evening. And under public safety new business, our first item is canine recognition.
I appreciate that, but I may not need that. I'm a little loud, they tell me. I'm sorry?
Not loud enough for TV.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I will speak nicely for TV. Okay. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that's a joke. Lighten up. Ladies and gentlemen of the Belvidere City Council, I'm Sergeant Dan Smaha with the Belvidere, Illinois Police Department. I would like to thank you for allowing us to come here tonight to introduce our 2 new canines. As is tradition with the Belvidere Police Department, we always introduce our 2 new officers or new officers when they become part of the family of the Belvidere Police Department. Tonight, I also want to thank you for being proactive instead of reactive. With the new law changes coming January 1st in the state of Illinois, we were faced with a decision to have dogs imprinted that can smoke cannabis and run the risk of losing cases after January 1st or obtaining new canine units that are not imprinted with cannabis. With your permission and you being proactive instead of reactive, we now have 2 new canine units that will be able to be on the road working right now, and we will not miss a beat with the new law change. With that, I would like to introduce Officer Zach Reese and Canine Shep, and Officer Brandon Parker and Canine Frank. These are our 2 new canines. Frankie.
He's checking the pulse right now.
He is. But he's not going to sit for cannabis.
He likes Kip. Kip, what do you got in your pocket?
He does.
Personal thing.
He's fun. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you. With that, with the bringing on of 2 new canines, we did have a retirement of Canine Box. Canine Box and his handler, Officer Ryan Davenport, were partners and still are partners from 2015 until now. Officer Davenport and Canine Box were very incremental in continuing the canine unit program. I would like to send a special thank you, though, to his family, his wife Morgan, his son Dax, his son Brody, and his new baby girl Winnie, for the time that they allowed for him to spend away from the family in order to keep the training for these canine units. When you have a canine, it's not just training 8 hours of the month. It's spending multiple hours on your own time in your backyard trying to get business owners to come in and let you help each other. I also want to thank Officer Davenport's shift for allowing him and training with him on shift when they had a brief moment. It's laying down tracks so you can find missing children or missing people. All that takes time. And Officer Davenport, and could I have the command staff of the Belvidere Police Department please step up also? You're the front row. Officer Davenport, I want to thank you for your unyielding vigilance to the Belvidere Police Department, for you and Box, for what you have done for the past 5 years, and I'm handing you this plaque, and thank you. I appreciate everything you've done for us. Stick around. Fun's just beginning. Okay. I appreciate your time. Again, now I have Dr. Kelly Kramer and her associates from Perryville Pets. Perryville Pets, while they come up, I'll speak real quick. Perryville Pets takes care of our canine officers and our units. Dr. Kramer asked us if we would be willing to help with a fundraiser that Perryville Pets puts on every year. It's called Bark in the Park. And what it is for 3 games, we bring the canine units out, and Perryville Pets does a fundraiser for, right now we are going to be able, due to their fundraiser, to get vests for our dogs, a bite suit to help with training, and also a digital database cloud training platform that we will be able to use in the cars along with the officers. If I remember correctly, this is your largest donation? Fundraiser?
Yep.
With everything that Dr. Kramer has done and her associates, they raised $2,700 for the Belvidere Police Department Canine Program, and we are greatly appreciative of that. And with this, I know it's just a small part of what you do and seeing all our dogs and taking care of them, and it's just a slight thank you for what you guys have done for us.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that greatly. Thank you so much.
I'll just take a minute. Thank you guys very much. We, with the Bark in the Park opportunity, they asked us to choose somewhere where we could donate our funds to. And we knew that there were going to be some changes, and we had started out initially for Ralphie, and there were some changes obviously with the needs for the dogs, and the Rockford Rivets fundraising efforts were a great contributor to that too. So we were able to get the $2,700 to put towards whatever they need. At least with the 2 dogs now, we have enough to cover them, and it makes our job as their vet easier if they don't get shot or stabbed. So it's definitely worth the efforts for that as well, and it helps to protect our officers too. So thank you guys. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
I've been instructed that I'm going to say a few words, so I just want to say thanks to Perryville Pets. The City Council and the Mayor's Office do a great job at supplying us with the budgetary funds that we need to get most of the things that we need from a day-to-day basis. But because of the help that we get from the community and businesses and individual sponsors, we can get some of those other items to supplement our day-to-day equipment. So because of that, I want to say thank you, and, thanks.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Attorney General. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You guys are welcome to stay if you'd like. We're going to be discussing your levies in a minute. I don't think everybody realizes what great police work and how beneficial to our department that these canines have been over the years. They've helped us solve a lot of things, and they're an additional weapon, if you will, to protect our officers when they're dealing with folks that are kind of nasty. So, next up, under number 4, Finance and Personnel, New Business. First up, we have the tax levy request from the Belvidere Fire Pension Fund. Oh, sorry. I didn't have that, I guess. So we'll need a motion to accept the $2,700 from Perryville Pet Hospital and use these funds of purchase for what was in, I believe you had this in your, okay. The motion
make
from
that
Alderman
motion.
Crawford, second by Alderman Porter. Additional questions or comments concerning the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sounds unanimous to me. So next up, we have the tax levy request from the Belvidere Fire Pension Fund. Sean, did you want to, Becky?
Included in your packet this evening is the annual request, the tax levy request from police and fire. This is a letter that breaks down the increase or the decrease. These are always increases these days. How much the increase is and generally why the increase is necessary. Also, the municipal compliance report for both police and fire is also included. And we also have our actuary here to talk this evening as well. And he can probably maybe help you understand a little bit of what goes into these numbers and why the increases and possibly what these funds are going to look like going forward.
Okay.
We have enough for everybody? 10, 12. Do you have any extras? Do you have a couple extras over here?
We got plenty. Thank you very much.
All right. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to the board regarding the police and fire pension funds. I'm Bob Reitz, the actuary for both funds. We've prepared a high-level summary of the information you've seen with regards to the contribution requests that the both police and fire pension funds are putting forth tonight. The top of the first page, we're going to go through the contribution recommendations. As you see, the fire fund requesting a contribution of $1,155,000. Police fund recommending a contribution of $1,393,000, total just over $2.5 million. That is an increase from the prior year. As Becky mentioned, we do see increases quite frequently these days, but they're not outside of what we would normally expect. Right now, we would normally expect an increase each year of about 3.25%, and that's due to the way that the amounts are amortized as a level percent of pay going forward. You also see the prior year amounts, $1.103 million for fire and $1.304 million for police. So net total increase for the year of approximately $40,000. Funded percentages, fire's at 58.56, last year at 58.66, so pretty much level for the year. Police, 63.2, last year 63.16. Again, pretty level for year and a total as well. Unfunded accrued liability, this is the amount that's basically you owe. So when you're talking about a recommended contribution, the amount to be contributed, it's comprised of two different components. One's the normal cost. The normal cost is accrual of benefits by all police officers and firefighters. And then there's a second piece of payment of your unfunded accrued liability under a certain amortization method. Right now, we're showing a total of $25.3 million of unfunded liability that has to be amortized in the upcoming years. And that's how we come up with piecing that amount to get to those recommended contributions amount. And then the bottom of the page, we just show some of the head counts that are in place. We have a little bit of section on the demographics, what happened between each of the two funds, for a little bit of a background as well. Going to the next page, we're talking about change in net position. Net position is the accounting term for market value of assets. So what happened to your assets throughout the year? You started the year $15.5 million in fire, $21.2 million in police. Employer contributions, $1,070,000 fire, $1.251 million in police. It's important to note those amounts are consistent with the amounts that were requested 2 years ago by each fund. So if you recall the way that the taxes work and the levies come in, the funds request an amount, say for example today, by the time the request comes in, by the time the amounts are levied, and by the time the taxes actually start filtering in, it takes about a 2-year period. So we're actually comparing today's money that came in to what was requested 2 years ago. And if we looked at the statements, and especially in your audit with regards to the GASB 68 reports, we have a 5-year history showing that you've been paying 100% of the requested amounts over the past 5 years. That's what both boards, police and fire, want to see, is you're getting the contributions they're requesting. What that also means from the perspective of the village is that your plan is projecting solvent. You're projecting to have enough money to pay all benefits in the future. It'd be a situation when you're not making those payments, or you have some other items out there that's going to cause us insolvency. It's going to be a greater burden to the fund. Employee contributions came in. So this is the employee deferrals that comes out of their paychecks every month. $237,000 for fire, $332,000 for police, and then investment returns, $1,034,000, $1.52 million for the two funds respectively. Each fund, you're paying out about $2.8 million total in benefit payments. So this is the payments to the current retirees and survivors, disabled members. Expenses of approximately $75,000 for both funds, and we're showing a net position change throughout the year of a growth of $2.5 million. One item we like to talk about with regards to those benefit payments that you're making is are they a lot? How much is that going to hurt the fund going forward? If we took a ratio, for example, of a fire fund, 1.36 million divided by your market value of assets, you're paying out about 8.2% of your money each year in benefit payments. Similarly, for police, you're paying out about 6.4% in benefit payments each year. Is that a good or bad amount? We don't know. Ideally, we would like to say 7%. Why 7%? That's what your investment return assumption is. If you can hit 7% investment returns, you would say investment returns are paying our benefits, so that means all the money that's coming in from the city and coming in from the participants are going to where it's needed to pay down that unfunded liability and to fund the future accruals of benefits. So you're under that on police, you're over that on fire, but as a whole, you're pretty much right on target to hitting that assumption. So we just like to make sure in this volatile economy right now, investment returns are going to be up, they're going to be down, we don't know what's going to happen. But you have a good steady track record going forward that you're going to be able to make those benefit payments going forward because you do have support of the city to be making the contributions as requested. Okay. Flipping to the next page, we talk about the benefit payments and what do they look like in 5 and 10 years? How significant are they going to grow? Fire in 5 years is going to grow about $400,000. 10 years it's going to go up about $750,000 additional to what you're currently paying today to $2.1 million. Similarly, for police is going to grow from $1.47 million up to $2.6 million in 10 years. So those are some numbers. Means you have a group of officers and group of firefighters that are getting within the range to retire. They're getting there, and you also have the COLA increases on your current population, and people are living longer. You have an increased mortality assumption that people are going to live longer, take those benefit payments for a longer period of time. So just a number that we as actuaries keep our eye on, making sure we're tracking how those benefit payments are going, and that's also going to influence the contributions going into the fund going forward. Again, we see pretty significant increases here, but if over the same 10 years you still get the same consistent funding levels and asset returns that you have been receiving, we would expect that not to be an issue. We'd expect you to be able to cover those benefit payments without much strain to the city. Okay. Next page, page 4, we talk about the change in contribution. Why did the contributions go up by $52,000 for fire and $89,000 for police? First item being we expect the contribution to go up. Again, we're doing this on a percent of payroll basis. We expect officers, firefighters to accrue additional year benefits. They expect salary increases, so we expect the accrual of benefits to go up. We also expect interest to accrue on the existing liability, but we also subtract out the benefits and obligations that are being paid to get to that net increase. We do have other demographic and financial items that also influence the contribution requirement. First item being salary increases greater than or less than expected. You see a small increase on the fire side, and actually police, we have a long-term assumption of 3.75% in place. Most officers are more in the 2% range, so their pay increases are a little bit less than what we expected, had a savings to the plan. Demographic changes, you really didn't have very many, and the next couple pages detail somewhat the changes were. The police side, I don't think you had really any activity at all with regards to demographics. The population was pretty much the same as the prior year. The fire, you had a couple new hires, and you had a couple retirees that we replaced each other. So with that activity, you can see that the demographic changes were pretty much net even for the fire side and a little bit of increase for police, because we would have expected more activity to have happened that didn't occur, so that usually increases your cost. Assumption changes, nothing police, a $5,700 gain for the fire side. Asset returns less than expected. You didn't quite hit that 7% threshold this past year, so to the extent that your assets came in a little bit less than that, would increase your costs. In addition, we have what's called the actuarial value of assets, which is a little bit different than your market value. What the actuarial value of assets does, in the year that you do have investment gains and losses above or beyond that 7%, we don't have to recognize those amounts in that 1 year. We get to smooth that over a 5-year period. So right now, each of the funds have an actuarial value of assets which is larger than your market value, which means you have more investment losses that have occurred in the past 5 years that we're still deferring, and those amounts will have to be recognized in the upcoming years, which will again increase your cost a little bit going forward. If 2019 happens to continue as it is and you're having pretty good investment years so far, we would expect a lot of the gains you would have this year to offset those losses, and you'd have a little bit more equal number going forward. Contributions less than expected. Pretty much you're right in line. As I mentioned before, you are getting the contributions as you've been requesting. There is just that timing difference of when the funds actually come in, so it makes these numbers fluctuate a little bit. $400 for fire, $3,600 for police, but relatively those are pretty close. And again, that's just really a timing issue of when the money actually does come into the fund, showing for the net increase of the $141,000 for both funds combined. As I mentioned before, the next 2 pages are just a summary of some of the activity that happened throughout the year with regards to demographics. And page 7 is just a summary, kind of the same summary of the contribution increase that I spoke of. This is how it influenced your funded percentage. We would expected both funds to grow at about 180 to 146 basis points each year, with some of those demographic and financial items made some deviations in there. So net, the fund was about equals what you were in the prior year. And then the last page is just strictly for the financial statements, what the city is showing for a net pension liability or their balance sheet liability for both funds and combined within the audit. And I would like to open up to questions. Everybody has any questions, comments on these amounts? Anything else going on? I know there's a lot in the pension world today, so.
What do you surmise or expect with the consolidation of pensions, the effect of that will be from your guys' viewpoint at this juncture, because we really don't know what that looks like.
We really don't know what that looks like. So just so everybody's aware, the consolidation that's been talked about has been passed by both the House and the Senate during the veto session, just waiting for the governor's signature. And what that means is they're going to take all 650 or so police and fire pension funds and consolidate them into one police fund and one fire fund, approximately $14.5 billion of assets we're talking about within these 2 funds. And what's that mean to you? The theory behind why they did it is to consolidate for investment purposes. They think as a larger fund, many of these funds can get a better asset return than they're currently experiencing through the local funds themselves. One being some of the funds that are less than $10 million in size can't invest. They're limited only to 45% in equity. Some that are under $2.5 million are limited to 10% investment in equity. So they think going to a larger fund and being able to extrapolate that out for those smaller funds will definitely be an advantage. Your funds are over that amount, so right now you're limited to a 65% equity share of what you can invest in, and even within that 65%, there's certain investment vehicles that you're not allowed to get into that other funds can do. So in theory, it should help you. There's a lot of work to be done to see how they're going to make it work, and I think theoretically, it seems like it's a good idea, but a lot of it is going to be won or lost in how it's implemented and how the operations of it goes forward. It's about a 30-month period of which, effective January 1st, they're going to start looking at all the funds. They're going to put their teams together. They're going to audit each and every fund before they start to take the money in. They're going to have separate actuaries come and produce a new set of assumptions for all funds, and start to contribute, start to make their recommendations that way. Could be similar to how the DOI currently calculates a statutory minimum contribution. It could be still the use of a private actuary to determine other amounts. We're not quite certain of that. They still have to establish the board that's going to be running the funds. They have a temporary board in place, but they will have a full board that will take place with representatives from the communities, from elected participants from the police members and fire members, in addition to some IML members and other government agencies that will have be a part of the board as well. The governor will assign an executive director of each fund, and he will be able to hire staff to help implement and run and make everything work. And from the local perspective, the current boards will still exist. So right now, the current boards will still have all authority that they've currently have, with the exception of investment authority. They're not going to have any influence or have any say in how their money is going to be invested anymore. And that's a big concern for many, because not every fund and not every board wants to invest the same way. They don't all want to take the same risks. They want to be a little bit more conservative. Some want to be a little bit more aggressive. You lose all autonomy with regards to that, and you're just going to be basically each year told how much money you have and go forward with it. So a lot of people are really concerned with that aspect of it. There's a lot of people out there saying the government and city or state's just going to steal our money and all those sorts of things. That's a big concern. I hear it pretty much every board, and I can't say I completely disagree with that. In theory, it shouldn't happen. They are trying to put the appropriate language in place to prevent items like that from happening. But who's to say at the last hour something doesn't get stricken out or something like that, and it opens up a door for some other thing. A lot of cities and municipalities are fighting it. They want to try to fight it. They want to seek for a legal remedy to not have to do so. So there's just a lot of uncertainty with it right now and how it's going to hit each and every fund, each and every city, town, village, whomever.
So your surmise then overall is we're holding our head above water and we're staying in about an equal position from year to year?
Yeah, from right now, the next 2 years are going to be pretty much status quo, operate as you have been, until the states picks you as to be audited and start to transfer your money over. We don't know what order they're going to go in. One theory is they're going to take all the small funds first, try to get all those funds so they can start investing and getting the asset returns that they could, or they're going to try to take some of the large funds first to get a big pool to start with and then start going forward. So again, that's just an implementation thing. We don't even have any guidance on how that's going to take place. The theory is it's going to be, better for the funds, better for the taxpayers. That's what they built this around. Again, the implementation will be the correct answer of how that actually flows through.
The IML issued a statement today to our members that it's a year-long, and asked for people who are interested in representing the IML on the boards.
Right.
And that it's a year-long commitment to work toward getting some kind of structure in place from the first of the year till next year.
Right. And I know for like police or fire, the members, the active members or retired members, if they want to be up for consideration to put on the boards, they have to get 500 names or so within a pretty short period of time to put them, to even get their name on the ballot to be considered for one of those roles. So everybody knows the way the boards will be, it's a 9-person board, which will have 5-person representation from either active, retired, police or fire, and then 4 people's represented from the administrative or IML or some of those agencies. So, but with regards to that, there will still be a supermajority required for voting on some items, so just the active or retired members can't just make all the roles. There will be some supermajority that will be required for some more of the significant decisions to be made. And that was one of the items that came in through at one of the last minutes, if you followed the proceedings in the veto session when the FOP came on board, and that was one of the concessions they came in, and then some other things that came in along the same time, got the IML in a little bit of a head spin as well. So there are going to be Tier 2 benefit enhancements as part of this. So they expect a little bit of better benefits for all Tier 2 members, as it's been determined that they believe that the legislation that was passed, years ago when they made the Tier 1 versus Tier 2 difference, they cut benefits a little too far. So they are going to start to give some of that back. And it also will be a little bit benefit for surviving spouses, and some of the retired members will have a little bit increase there as well.
Do you have questions, Council? Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the tax levy request from Belvidere Fire Pension Fund. Crawford? Second. Ratcliffe? Questions or comments concerning the motion now on the floor? Becky, did you want to present something? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the motion to approve the tax levy request from Belvidere Fire Pension Fund signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sounds unanimous to me. Item B, I'll entertain a motion to approve the tax levy request from Belvidere Police Pension Fund.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Crawford, second by Porter. Questions, comments, or further discussion concerning the motion now on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Again, unanimous. Be forwarded to City Council for further action. Under other, we have a general cannabis overview, and it's going to be a presentation that several of our esteemed administrative folks will present. Attorney Dorella?
Actually, asked this to be put back on the agenda. As you know, we've talked about this quite a bit. January 1st, which is the beginning of the decriminalization of recreational use of cannabis, begins next month, effectively, January 1st. And while the city is not in line to receive one of the first dispensary locations in the state, remember I went through that whole list and we weren't in that list, obviously an early adopting medical marijuana facility could look to try and put one here. Even in that first year, it's not likely, but it is conceivable. Wanted to make sure this council understood that for all practical purposes, you need to take some action. And when I say some action, I say vaguely I do that on purpose, because the default under the state statute, number one, we have no control over this one. If people want to use recreational cannabis privately, they may do so. We cannot restrict that in any way, other than what's already in the state statute. The default is if somebody wants to open a dispensary in the city of Belvidere, they can, unless this council passes an ordinance saying that we're not going to allow dispensaries in the city. So if you want to deny the ability to open a dispensary in the city, we need to pass an ordinance doing that. Even if we wish to allow dispensaries within the city, the presumption would be that the city council would then want to impose the 3% tax upon that dispensary. That also would require an ordinance by the city council. So whether or not you wish to allow dispensaries, one or the other, you effectively have to adopt some kind of an ordinance, assuming you want to receive the tax benefits. And of course, the last portion of it is the state authorize municipalities to allow cannabis lounges. That also would require a separate ordinance if you wish to do so. So the reason why I asked that be put back on the agenda is essentially we need to look for some kind of direction from the committee of the whole as to what the city council wishes to do with respect to, first, whether or not we're going to prohibit dispensaries within the city. Second, assuming that the council doesn't wish to prohibit them, allow them to come into the city, is it going to want to place a 3% tax upon those dispensaries and otherwise limit them by its zoning powers as to where they can go, things like that. And then lastly, which I think staff pretty much is unanimous that we don't necessarily recommend doing cannabis lounges, if for no other reason there's no way to really effectively, other than standard field sobriety tests, determine if somebody's driving under influence of cannabis. But if we wish to, they could do the cannabis lounges. Again, we need direction on that to adopt the appropriate ordinance. I put the memo I gave to you before back in the packets for your review for tonight, but I guess I'd open up to any other comments from staff or from the committee.
Attorney Trella?
Yeah.
If, in my position, I don't want to do anything the state doesn't require us to do, what does that look like?
If you wanted to do that, that would effectively involve prohibiting dispensaries within the city of Belvidere and would require an ordinance to do so.
Okay, and does that automatically negate the pot lounge without us passing an ordinance to allow it?
Pot lounges are the default not allowed
Okay.
unless the city allows it. So no, we would not take action on that one at all.
Okay, who would like to wade into this? Well, we got to talk about it, so let me know what you're thinking now, so we don't have to go over this 9 times. Alderman Stevens, then Alderman Porter, and then Alderman Crawford.
Well, the cannabis lounge, no. The tax on it and allowing someplace, in the business district where, yeah, I can agree with that. We just got to figure out where we want to allow it, either like in an industrial area if we have to, or downtown, or definitely not residential.
You cannot authorize in residential anyway, so.
Well, good.
Okay, Alderman Porter?
Concur with this, same thing with no on the lounges, but possibly yes for selling, because I like the idea of the 3% tax.
Okay, Alderman Crawford?
Yeah, I agree with the 3% tax too, but as far as the lounge, they'll have to be selling in that too, right? So what about that?
No.
Taxes on that?
All right, so the concept of a cannabis lounge was a last-minute addition to the Cannabis Act itself. I don't think it was particularly well thought out. I got a head shaking back, they're probably agreeing with me. But at any rate, there's several problems with it. Number one, the first of which is you can't even buy insurance for the cannabis lounge yet. I'm sure that product will come out from the insurance company sometime in the future, but I don't know too many people that want to open one yet because they can't get effectively dram shop liability insurance for a cannabis lounge. More importantly, they don't specify where you could do it. So, for example, yes, a dispensary, we could authorize them to have a lounge attached to their facility, I suppose, and do it that way. What about a bar? A good old-fashioned bar where they serve alcohol? There's nothing in the statute that says they can't do it, but the statute also says you cannot sell cannabis where alcohol is sold. So that would be a BYOP kind of concept.
And you can't smoke cigarettes in a bar, so.
Well, that raises another question because the act also says that where you have a cannabis lounge, the Smoke-Free Illinois Act doesn't apply. So if you allow a bar to do it, could they then smoke in their bar? They didn't think this one through at all, which is one of the reasons why we're saying we don't necessarily recommend doing that. Let the chips play out for a while before you consider doing that. Let the concept, essentially don't be the guinea pig. Let the concept grow on its own. Let the market come up to speed with respect to insurance and things like that. Test of chest for sobriety, more like they do for alcohol. Let those come out first before you start wading into those weeds.
Yes, Alderman Crawford.
This is for attorney. Where do you get the 3%?
State statute.
Oh, we can't even make it higher?
Nope.
even being home rule, huh?
Nope, the Home Rule Authority was preempted by the statute. In 612 pages, they decided to preempt Home Rule Authority.
So if it's, yes, Alderman Snow.
So, not a big fan of legalizing it, and I do concur with the fact that somewhere in the line, we're gonna get, people are gonna consume it, they're gonna buy it. If they don't buy it in our city limits, just like the gaming, they'll just go outside the limit and then get it in the county or go over to Rockford. We miss out on the 3% revenue, they're still gonna be stoned, doesn't matter. So, and I would agree at this point, I would let it shake out for as far as the lounge thing. So at this point, I would support allowing it and maximizing the percentage to 3% for the tax.
If it's permissible, I'd like to have Chief Woody make some comments, because the PD has looked at this extensively.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Now, I get it. The tax revenue definitely is attractive. But I've done some research on this, and, you know, there's 9 other states that have legalized prior to us that we can kind of draw from their experience, and we'd be silly not to. And it's not necessarily just a tax revenue consideration. You know, there's a quality of life consideration that we need to take into account. When you look at Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, I mean, all 3 states have legalized cannabis, and all 3 were in the top 4 for increases in chronic homelessness. Now, Colorado had a study done where they interviewed several homeless shelters who had contributed 20 to 30% increase of their homeless population due to cannabis legalization. You know, people coming to their state because cannabis was legal. You know, Belvidere currently has a great, I guess we sit in a position where we don't have a big, if any, homeless population. And that might be something that potentially we may want to take into consideration when, you know, looking at whether or not you want to allow a dispensary. The National Institute of Drug Abuse also looked at societal and social environment factors, and they said that you have to look at a person's environment, and people tend to, if they are inclined to use drugs, they're going to use those drugs that are prevalent and available. They specifically pointed to alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. And then you have those people that are going to be using those drugs around others that may influence them to use other drugs as well. Now, I know we all get the fact that our environment influences us, and that's why for many years, well, prior to the internet, you know, we were very strict, if not prohibitive, of allowing adult bookstores. I mean, the same idea, you know, and there's restrictions on advertising alcohol and tobacco to minors. You know, for the same philosophy that, you know, when you have these things around, it does influence the community. And I think our community is one that, despite the revenue, is one that we may want to think long and hard before necessarily just jump into a yes vote.
Can I make a comment first, George? If you analyze the Colorado experience, and I don't know enough about Washington and Oregon experience as yet, well, they layered taxes from the top to the bottom, and every unit of government was allowed to put some kind of a tax on it. And essentially what they did is raise the price of marijuana above the street price of marijuana, and so now people are buying it on the street again. One of the issues has always been in the war against drugs was trying to squeeze out the cartels who don't have a soul, as far as I'm concerned. They'll sell or do anything that nets them money. They'll kill anybody that gets in their way, and they spread like a disease. They fomented the spread of gang violence, first with the black population and then with the Hispanic population. And now we're living in a world that is a result of our never winning the war on drugs against the drug cartels. I was totally in favor of medical marijuana as a prescription and given to those folks who suffer chronic pain, and that could alleviate that issue. I think we're just opening up another door, and it quite honestly, from my perspective, I am so ashamed that we are in a position that sin taxes are what we use to raise the money to take care of our infrastructure needs, to pay the bills that the city has to run our community effectively. You know, what are cigarettes, $10 a pack now? The tax on liquor, the tax on every single sin tax there is. And so I think we're going down a bad road here. I don't know what 3% of that looks like. I do know that I learned I was in favor of doing the gaming. I wished I'd never opened my mouth because, you know, we had to get to this point where we had to limit it to 30. The social cost of all of that is more than you know. Go and talk to the pharmacists in town. And the pharmacists in town will tell you there are a lot of folks who are retired who run out of medicine and they don't have the money to renew their prescriptions because they sit in a gaming parlor. The typical person that sits in a gaming parlor is 62-plus years old and female. And what do they gamble with? They gamble with their Social Security money, with their pension money, etc. I think because it's out of sight and out of mind, and this sounds like a really good thing, the IML Legislative Day this spring, the two ladies who sponsored this, a state representative and a state senator, came and talked to us, and I had the opportunity to sit and talk to them for a while. They have no idea. They were talking about allowing 25 marijuana plants, you know, for homegrown. They had no idea a marijuana plant grows 8 feet tall and it's about 12 feet around. 25 plants is a plantation. They never thought this thing through. And so they're looking, the state is looking at this as a tax object to help pay their indebtedness, okay? We know they're not going to get out of their own way, just like we were talking about I have no great faith that if we start paying more and we've rearranged how the fire and police pensions are going to be run, that the state at some point is just going to, hey, we got to take that and pay for the schools in Chicago. That's kind of how all of us downstate folks kind of feel. And in talking to our gentlemen who represent the fire and police in terms of being the go-to guys on these ideas, we kind of agreed that this is a partial fix and it might help some, but I think we're going down the same road with marijuana. And that's why I'm in favor of not doing anything state won't make us. I don't care about the 3% tax. I think that, I don't know what it's going to amount to. I just think that it opens the door because this is a very reasonable community to live in, and I think we can look at the hotel on State Street and the kind of folks that we attract there because it's so reasonable to live here. I just think it's a bad idea, but I'll button my lip, and Alderman Crawford had something else he wanted to contribute, and we want to hear everybody's opinion.
I was just going to say, I might agree with the chief about the homelessness, but I think more if you had lounges all around. I don't think a dispensary would do something like that. I would think if you had lounges.
Well, you know, I guess it's 8 miles to Rockford to go get your pot, so.
But, you know, it could be every town that surrounds us, and then we are out to 3%.
Okay. Well, that's a good point. So, what do we want to do? Yes, Alderman Freeman.
So my feeling is, you know, it's widely accepted throughout the United States, and I'm pretty sure that, I don't know, within the next 5 years, it's probably going to be federally legalized. I don't want to get left behind where, like Alderman Crawford said, every other town around us is collecting the 3% tax, and we're out in the cold. And then when we do finally come around and get with the program, everybody's already going other places and we're out. I don't know about the lounges. I don't really see any difference of going to a bar and drinking or going to a lounge and smoking. Honestly, I don't see a difference, but I don't want to get left behind. Roll with the changes. That's how I feel.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. Do you think if all the towns around us ended up with lounges, and then we decided to pass it, that people wouldn't buy it here? If that really were the case, I'm just wondering. I think, it's like anything else. If you're a dry county and then you start selling liquor, people are gonna go where it's the closest to buy it. And I get the revenue scheme thing. I understand the revenues, because we're revenue challenged all the time.
I mean, people probably would buy it if we ended up opening one, but I don't want to make an ordinance saying that we're prohibiting them. I don't want to do that. And, the 62-year-old woman putting her money in the slot machine, if she wasn't doing that, she'd probably be buying scratch-offs at the gas station anyway. It's a personal choice. It's free will. Either you're going to spend your paycheck in the slots, or you're going to go smoke marijuana, or you're not.
And just to clarify, because the last couple exchanges, I think I heard some confusion as to what actions the city can or should take, or must take, I should say. We don't need to do anything if you want to prohibit cannabis lounges. Those are de facto prohibited until we do something positive. So we never have to pass an ordinance prohibiting the lounge. We just don't do anything. To prohibit the dispensary, we would have to take an ordinance to prohibit the dispensary.
So there's no way that at this point in time, we couldn't put an advisory referendum on the next ballot to see about those items and see what the actual voters in this.
I would strongly recommend against doing that now, because it's one of the situations where, fine, you put an advisory referendum on the ballot, and that's what, a year and a half away. Actually, you can do it for next November. But the reality is, it's not up to the voters. They elected this body to make these kinds of decisions, and it's what the state authorized. So even if the voters said one thing, the council could go completely the other way if they wanted to.
It would be advisory.
Yeah, I just don't know.
Alderman Snow.
Like the idea.
So with our liquor license, we have a $10,000 fee associated with that. It used to be 20. Is that anything we can do with the dispensaries on this?
No.
What about with the pot lounge?
Yes.
So we could make it 50 grand, right? 100 grand.
I wouldn't push that envelope.
Well, you're talking about the revenue, and if we can set the limit, then.
And the reason why I say that is because, historically, you're only supposed to charge what you need to administer a program. However, the state has specifically allowed municipalities to basically charge what they want for a liquor license. Use as a scheme to raise revenue, essentially. That is silent in the Cannabis Lounge Act. I shouldn't call it an act. The one sentence or two sentences in the entire 612-page act that is devoted to cannabis lounges. So while my answer is yes, you can charge more than you usually would. How much more? That would take a lot of research on my part.
Alderman Snow.
Well, I will take and heed Chief Woody's advice and really actually vote not to participate at this point in allowing them. If for some reason we wind up demographically having an issue in the future, 2 years down the road, that happens regardless because of the other communities or the county or whatever is occurring allows it, and we're just missing out, then we can always reconsider at that point. Correct?
My first question,
I'm not sure what you're.
You said not allowing them. What?
Not allowing, do the ordinance to prohibit. We can always, and then we can always look at it 2 years down the road.
Absolutely.
Or whatever and repeal it.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, ma'am.
So your main argument was like homelessness? So the quality of life here, we would have a whole bunch of homeless people here, I think. The homelessness in those states aren't directed at specific communities. I think a lot of people moved to Colorado because it was legal there, but maybe people from Missouri would, move to Illinois, but I don't know how that would directly affect, everybody's going to move to Belvidere when it's legal in the whole state, and we're not going to be the only place that is going to have dispensaries.
No, that's correct, and obviously I can't predict that. But I can just look at the information that we have available to us, and those states that have legalized marijuana did see an increase in chronic homelessness, and common sense would dictate that those homeless that are there because of cannabis are going to move to those communities that have cannabis available to them. And that's how I correlate that with specifically dispensaries. Because there's a lot of information out there, against just legalization in and of itself, but that's not the discussion at hand here, not something that I wanted to get into. So trying to relate it specifically to dispensaries, that was one of the concerns that I thought would be important to take into consideration. And, in addition to the on-site consumption, something that, I would hope you take into consideration is, so if we have a bunch of patrons that are smoking cannabis and then there's a call for service inside that business, how exactly are law enforcement supposed to enter that environment and then be able to continue on with the potential for just being exposed to, cannabis high? So just something else to take into consideration when discussing that.
Attorney Drella, is there any leeway in the statute that would allow us to have a dispensary to dispense only to those with medical marijuana prescriptions?
No.
Okay. Well, yes, Jane.
I'm just going to ask some pointed questions, because this is the information I'll need to know for when I process the text amendment.
Well, Jim, why don't we wait until we know whether or not they're going to prohibit dispensaries or not?
Well, we also need to talk about transportation, processing, and growing as well.
Well, this is true. And she raises a good point. I mean, we've completely ignored this issue, partially because I don't think it's going to be a great likelihood here, but it's a possibility. And actually, I have to check the statute. I'm not sure we can prohibit a grower, but we could certainly zone them. I did not check the statute about prohibiting growers. Transportation is not as big of an issue. That's just governed by state law. But obviously, storage would be, so.
There are a lot of hoops to jump through to become a grower.
Yeah. There's a lot of hoops. I mocked the General Assembly for this behemoth of a statute. And then I mocked them again for passing an amendment that's over 400 pages long. The reality is the amount of regulation on this industry is ridiculous. A lot of the statute is geared towards what are we going to do with the tax money. Yeah, that's a great portion of the statute. But the amount of regulation on this industry is ridiculous. For no reason, just look at it, 600 pages versus about 40 pages for the Liquor Control Act. They're making marijuana dispensaries jump through the same hoops, at least they're planning on, as they did for medical marijuana. For example, all the products got to be locked up in safes in the back, can't have it on the product floor. You have empty boxes up there, but not the actual product. ID everybody coming into the store, lots of video surveillance. All their salespeople are going to have to go through effectively the cannabis version of BASA training. So it's going to be very regulated. But at the same time, it takes away our ability to regulate at the local level.
So tell me again, what's the licensing scenario? How much can we charge if we grant a dispensary license?
I don't believe we can charge anything at all. The only thing we can do, let me phrase that, it's not I don't believe, we cannot charge anything at all for dispensary license. We cannot even.
Who do they pay?
Let me finish. We cannot license them at all, except for requiring them to get a business registration license of general applicability. So if we require one of the video store, we can require one of the dispensary, but nothing more. At the state level, it is a sliding scale depending on when they actually adopt. But for example, your early adopters, your first ones, I want to say the initial application fee is like $30,000 or something like that. But on top of that, they have to give a $150,000 donation to seed money for these low-income areas to get their, I should say, the other new adopters that are cannabis dispensaries to get started. And it all depends on when they adopt and things like that, but the basic license fee, I believe, is about $30,000 at the state level.
Additional questions or comments? Then I guess we'll take a straw vote by show of hands about who wants to do what. And if you could surmise the different positions you've
Sure.
noticed here?
So I'm going to preface this with Gina raised the point on the grower, so I'll have to come back to you again on that one sometime in the future. It might just come back in a recommended zoning ordinance if we really can't prohibit it. I guess the first question is a show of hands for those who would like to prohibit dispensaries within the city of Belvidere. All right. Now a basic show of hand of those who would like to ostensibly allow dispensaries within the city of Belvidere. All right, and assuming we allow dispensaries, do we want to impose a 3% tax? Okay. Gina, from a zoning perspective, what would you recommend doing? Sure.
Can something like that, you're going to do a 3% tax. We know, never mind.
Well, anticipating question, it would actually be collected by the state like any other sales tax. They'll remit it back to us. Depending on when you actually adopt the ordinance imposing the tax, will determine when the tax actually starts getting collected. The earliest time it will be collected, I believe, is July of next year, but it wouldn't affect us because we won't have one by then anyway.
What I was going to ask is, but we don't know what the state's going to do with the pension. Can something like that 3% just be earmarked just for fire and police pension to try to pay it off
You could
faster?
certainly.
But I don't know what the city, what the state's going to do.
You could earmark what you do with your money as you see fit. As you know, and we've been through this road before, from a legal perspective, I recommend against doing that for a couple of reasons. And as, well, this council may not recall, some of you may remember, but because one council chooses to earmark it one way, another council down the road can change that as they see fit. So it's basically useless. More importantly, the council always has the power through the budget process to say, okay, we're going to take our 3% that we're getting from cannabis this year, or our 3% that we're getting from gaming this year, or whatever it is. I shouldn't say 3%, what was it, 5% of 30%? And earmark it for that purpose for this year. So I would do that through your budget process, not as a grandiose ordinance.
So I guess the next step is you will,
I think Gina wants to have a couple questions about zoning.
Yeah, just because I don't want to create a text amendment, have it go through public hearing at the plan commission, then have it come here and the council say, oh, no, that's not what we meant. So I'd rather flesh out some of the basics now. For the dispensary, you can either outright permit it or permit it by special use. Poplar Grove permitted theirs by special use, but there's a lot to argue that not a lounge, but a dispensary is no different than a liquor store. So if you outright permit it, then do you want to put setback restrictions on it? The IML has suggested setbacks that are quite large, that in larger cities is fine because you have the land mass. In Belvidere, those setbacks are nearly impossible to meet, and you can't zone out something. So we could either adopt the same setbacks that the liquor code adopts, because, cannabis and alcohol is illegal mind-altering substance that is age-restricted. So you could kind of view them the same thing and treat them the same. Or you can make cannabis a little bit harder. That's kind of the feel I need to get from the council so I know how to draft the language. So for the dispensary, that's the biggest thing. Outright permitted or by special use. Super big setbacks that are nearly impossible to meet. No setbacks, or setbacks similar to the liquor code. I myself would say treat it like a liquor store and use similar setbacks. The state is putting on significant regulations for signage and stuff that's really going to, they're not going to have the 8 million flag signs and flashing lights by a pot here. They're really restricting the allowable signage. I would say for the zoning districts, general business, planned business, maybe not allow it in central business, which is our downtown. The more and more bars and gaming parlors we got downtown, the more negative feedback I got from the community. It hasn't chased any businesses away, but it has definitely put a bad taste in the community's mouth, so maybe just restrict it to general and planned and not in central business. The lounge, I get the vibe that there's no lounges. And then since I'm asking questions, I'm just going to put it out there. For the growing and processing, that I would recommend having in the industrial district. Yes, it's growing. People think it's agricultural, but they're not open field cannabis. You know, they're in 50,000, 100,000 square foot buildings that are highly secured. You don't want that in your agricultural area, because if something ever happens, you'll never find a user to reuse that building. You know, it's an industrial scale building, so keep it in the industrial district. There are also significant water users, so regardless of how you feel about the dispensary on the growing side, you know, you don't even know, you know, you drive down Newburgh 20, you don't know what's going on in any of those buildings. The growing side would be just the same, so.
I would keep in mind, and Gina brought this issue up, number one, signage restrictions. The act does prohibit signage within 1,000, I believe it's 1,000 feet of any school. So that really restricts effectively where they're going to be able to promote themselves. From the growing perspective, realistically, the state is only allowing, I can't remember the number offhand, X number of growers per the entire state, and they're also restricting as to where they can go, trying to spread the love, so to speak. So the chance of us having a grower actually operate in Belvidere is pretty slim, but I suppose you want to have something in place just in case. And again, on the, as far as the concept of special use with respect to the sales or the dispensaries, you know, you typically use a special use to control not within X number of feet of a school, things like that. You can do that in your base zoning. You don't have to put that as a special use. It's probably easier to do it in your base zoning. We're going to allow cannabis dispensaries, but you got to follow these three criteria. That way you have to go have public hearings every single time you have one coming out. But as far as hours of operation and all the operation requirements, those are actually governed by state statute, and we cannot regulate those at all. So all the usual things that we would use for regulating through our special use process are probably prohibited from doing anyway by the preemption of home rule authority through the state. All you'd be doing with your special use for most part would be setbacks, which you can put in your base code, and perhaps simply, you know, each time review of where it's going, essentially. But if you have proper setbacks in there and limit your districts, really all you're doing is having public hearings for probably not a very good reason.
Yes, Kip.
The special use would allow the neighboring property owners to speak in favor or speak against the allowed use of a dispensary in their neighborhood.
It does, but the problem you run into, and we've had this issue with the city of Belvidere in the past, and we luckily didn't get sued on it. If the council and/or the Planning and Zoning Commission listen to property owners, but there's no legal reason to actually deny the special use, you get your rear end in a ringer in court, and you might end up paying their attorney's fees for having denied it unjustly. We were very lucky in the past in another situation where, and the statute of limitations isn't run, so I can talk about it now, where we denied improperly a special use, and luckily we did not get sued on it, in part because the applicant turned out didn't own the property, which worked out in our favor. But, you know, that's something you got to think about, because yes, your neighbors do get a chance to come in and speak one way or another, and that's one reason to go through special use process. But realize, if that applicant meets all the requirements of your special use, and you deny it anyway, you're looking at the potential for litigation.
So, do you want to surmise and offer an outline of what you're going to produce for the council?
All right, so I guess the question first off is, does the council wish to, I'm going to assume, abide by Jan's recommendation of allowing cannabis dispensaries, where was it, Gina? In the
Planned in general business, but not central.
planned in general business district. So basically not downtown, but otherwise it has to be in a business district. Is that abide with what the committee would like to see as far as a possible ordinance going forward? I guess the other question is, do you want to require a special use for each one? I will tell you that most communities are requiring special uses for this.
What is that? Does that give us a fee opportunity there with a special use?
No, just the regular special use cost of processing it.
Special use application fees range from $500 to $700, depending on what the request is, which isn't
So
much.
we may or may not get a grower, so $500 is
We're talking about dispensaries right now.
dispensary. How many can you have?
Well, initially, it's the medical plus 7, well, there's no limit on, strike that. In the first year, we're not going to have any, unless we get a medical, that's an early adopter. In the second year, in theory, we could get one or two, but the state is limiting how many dispensary licenses they will issue at one time. I want to say it goes up to like 115 or 125 or something like that. Total dispensaries throughout the state of Illinois, the entire state, in the second year. They restricted the total number of licenses that they will issue at any one time throughout the entire state. I can't remember how many it was. It was like 500 or 700, 500. And one of the things, because the state's the one issuing the licenses, they're required to look at is market saturation, how many dispensaries are in that area and what the need is. I can't see Belvidere ever qualifying for more than one or two, but that's up to the state.
Alderman Snow?
I would suggest we do the special use. I'd be interested to have the neighbors' input.
Okay.
And also with that, I'm assuming they would be allowed drive-throughs?
No, actually,
No,
it's really funny. The act says no drive-throughs and no home delivery.
This is getting crazy.
I mean, this is how detailed they got in the act. No drive-throughs, no home delivery. Why you can't do a drive-through? You can do a drive-through for alcohol. I don't know.
And your dispensary can't be mixed with another business, like, Family Video has the
Right.
CBD oil. They couldn't sell cannabis. It has to be a standalone storefront. You cannot share a business front with that.
Well, I mean, you can bake the goods in, never mind.
So what other surmises?
All right, so, whatever we do, actually, this is not going to come back to you at the next council meeting, because what I'm going to ask you to do is forward something, but will not come back next council meeting because we have to go through the zoning process first. But I guess it'd be a motion to adopt an ordinance imposing a 3% tax on cannabis dispensaries within the city of Belvidere, and to direct the planning department and the city attorney to process a text amendment to regulate the zoning of cannabis dispensaries within the city of Belvidere. And in fact, you know what, to make this easier for Shauna, sorry, Shauna, because you're writing it all down as we're talking, why don't we have a motion to direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance imposing a 3% tax upon the sales of marijuana or cannabis products through a dispensary, and direct the planning department and the city attorney to draft a zoning text amendment to regulate the location of cannabis dispensaries within the city of Belvidere.
May I have a motion?
So are those two separate
No, we'll just do one.
motions? Maybe we should do two separate.
Or if you would like to.
It's all going to be in the same ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, if you, oh, okay.
So, I have a motion.
You making that?
You making the motion? Who's making the motion?
I'll make that motion.
Crawford's making the motion. Stevens second the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye.
All right, so just so you know, if it comes back next, or in 2 weeks at all, it's going to come back as a motion to direct, but the actual ordinance will not come back probably for a couple months. Gina?
It wouldn't have a public hearing until January, so it would be before city council in February.
Okay.
All right. Well, that ends our activities for this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Alderman Crawford, may I have a second, please? Alderman Snow? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are now adjourned, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.